The meeting room fell silent as I walked in, all eyes fixed on the woman they'd once shunned. James Morgan, my former father-in-law, sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of barely concealed rage. Beside him his son, my ex-husband David, couldn't even meet my gaze. "Ms. Chen," James said stiffly, emphasizing my maiden name like it was something distasteful. "Thank you for coming." I smiled, setting my laptop on the polished mahogany table. "It's still Mrs. Morgan, actually. The divorce papers were never filed." The color drained from David's face. I hadn't planned to drop that bomb so early, but seeing them squirm gave me a satisfaction I couldn't resist. "My name is Sarah Chen Morgan, and 2 years ago, these people had thrown me out of their lives because I chose cybersecurity over their precious family banking tradition. Now their multimillion-dollar empire was under attack, and I was their last hope." "Let's focus on the matter at hand," James said sharply, sliding a folder across the table. "Our systems were breached last week. The hackers are threatening to release sensitive client data unless we pay $20 million within 48 hours. I picked up the folder, though I already knew its contents. I've been monitoring the situation since it began. Not that they needed to know that. "The Great Morgan and Sons Bank," I mused, flipping through the pages, "brought to its knees by the very thing you dismissed as irrelevant when I warned you about it." James's jaw tightened. "If you're here to gloat, I'm here because your head of it called me directly." I cut him off. He said, "You've tried everything else. Every security firm in the city turned you down because they know your systems are outdated. You're running infrastructure from the last decade because, and I quote, traditional banking doesn't need all that modern nonsense." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sarah, please, this isn't the time." "When is the time, David?" I asked, meeting his eyes for the first time. "When you stood silent while your father threw me out? When you chose your trust fund over our marriage? Or maybe now, when everything's falling apart?" 2 years earlier, this same room had witnessed a very different scene. I'd just completed my master's in cybersecurity, turning down a prestigious position at Morgan & Sons to accept a role at a leading tech firm. The betrayal, as James saw it, was unforgivable. "No Morgan has ever worked outside this bank," he shouted, pacing the room like a caged animal. "For 4 generations, we've built this legacy, and you want to throw it all away to play with computers." I tried to explain the importance of modern security measures, how the banking world was changing, but James Morgan didn't listen to women who challenged his authority, not even his daughter-in-law. "Either you take your rightful place in this bank," he declared, "or you're no longer welcome in this family." I looked to David then, hoping he'd finally stand up to his father. But he just stared at his shoes, shoulders slumped in familiar defeat. So I'd walked out, leaving behind their outdated ideas and suffocating traditions. I built my own consulting firm, gained a reputation as one of the best in the field. And now here they were, desperate for the very expertise they'd mocked. "The hack is sophisticated," I said, returning to the present, "but not impossible to trace. I can help you, but I have conditions." James leaned back, his expression wary. "What conditions?" I opened my laptop, typing quickly. "First, you'll implement every security measure I recommend, without argument. Second, you'll create a dedicated cybersecurity division with a proper budget. And third," I paused, savoring the moment, "you'll make a public announcement acknowledging the breach and my role in resolving it." "Absolutely not," James exploded. "We've never admitted to any security failures. The Morgan reputation is about to be destroyed anyway," I finished. "In 47 hours, every account number, every transaction, every dirty little secret will be public. Your choice." The silence that followed was deafening. James's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while David looked like he might be sick. "There's one more thing," I added, pulling up a series of emails on my screen. "Something interesting I found while examining the hack. Would you like to see who had access to your systems the night before the breach?" David's head snapped up, real fear in his eyes now. He knew exactly what I'd found. The late-night login, the disabled security protocols, the convenient gaps in the firewall, all traced back to one executive access code. His code. "We should discuss this privately," he said quickly, standing up. But I was done with their secrets, their backroom deals, their carefully maintained facades. "Sit down, David," I said quietly. It's time everyone knew exactly what kind of legacy your father has built. The projector hummed to life as I connected my laptop. David's access logs appeared on the screen, damning in their clarity. On Tuesday night at 11:43 p.m., I said, addressing the stunned board members, someone using executive code N7249 disabled the main firewall. 3 minutes later, they accessed the secure client database. By midnight, the backup systems were compromised. I turned to David. Would you like to explain why your code was used, or should I continue? James slammed his fist on the table. This is absurd. My son would never. Your son has been embezzling from Morgan and Sons for the past year. I cut in, switching to a new slide. Small amounts at first, carefully hidden in transaction fees. But lately he's gotten bolder. Haven't you, David? The room erupted in whispers as I displayed the evidence: transaction records, offshore accounts, falsified audits. David had been busy since I'd left, though not in ways his father would approve. You've been watching us, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time. I nodded. Did you really think I'd walk away completely? I built half these systems. I know every backdoor, every vulnerability, including the ones you exploited. Why? James demanded, turning on his son. We gave you everything. David laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the room. Everything except a choice. Did you ever ask what I wanted, Dad? If I wanted to spend my life trapped in this mausoleum of tradition. I watched my ex-husband carefully. The perfect Morgan hair was crumbling before our eyes, years of resentment spilling out. The hack, one of the board members, spoke up. Was it you? David shook his head. No, I made it possible. They approached me months ago. Said they could help me disappear, start fresh. All I had to do was leave a door open. You fool, James hissed. You've destroyed everything we've built. You destroyed it, David shot back. With your rigid rules, your impossible standards. Sarah was right about modernizing, about the security risks, but you wouldn't listen. You never listen. I cleared my throat. As fascinating as this family therapy session is, we're running out of time. The hackers don't care about your drama. They want their money, or everything goes public in. I checked my watch, 46 hours. James seemed to deflate, suddenly looking every bit his 65 years. Can you stop them? Yes, I said simply. I've already identified their location and method of attack. But my conditions stand, and I'm adding one more. What now? James asked warily. David turns himself in. No cover-up, no quiet resignation. The authorities need to know exactly what happened. David stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You can't be serious. Sarah, please, we were married. Doesn't that mean anything? I met his gaze steadily. It meant everything. That's why I waited 2 years to find the right moment. To show your father exactly what happens when he values his precious legacy over people. You planned this? James said slowly, realization dawning. You knew about David's activities all along. You waited until we were desperate. I learned from the best, I replied coldly. Isn't that what Morgans do? Use every advantage, never show weakness. You taught me well during those family dinners, James. The board members watched our exchange like a tennis match, decades of Morgan family dysfunction playing out before them. Some looked horrified, others oddly fascinated. Time's running out, I reminded them, closing my laptop. I'll be in my office when you're ready to meet my terms. All of them. I gathered my things, enjoying the heavy silence. At the door, I paused. Oh, and David. Those divorce papers you never filed? I have copies in my office. We can deal with that after you've turned yourself in. As I walked out, I heard James's voice, surprisingly quiet. What have we done? What indeed, I thought, stepping into the elevator. The Morgans had spent generations building their fortress of wealth and tradition, never realizing they were sealing themselves in a tomb. Now those walls were crumbling, and I was the only one who could prevent total collapse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next 48 hours transformed Morgan and Sons Bank forever. David surrendered to the authorities that evening, confessing everything: the embezzlement, his role in the hack, years of financial misconduct. The press had a field day. Morgan here betrays dynasty, banking legacy crumbles. I watched it unfold from my office across town, sipping coffee and monitoring the bank's systems. James had agreed to my terms, though I suspected it nearly killed him to do so. A team of my best engineers was already upgrading their security infrastructure, dragging Morgan and Sons into the modern era whether they liked it or not. You're really not going to tell them, are you? Grace asked, perched on the edge of my desk. My best friend and business partner had been with me through everything, helping orchestrate what the media was calling the biggest banking scandal of the decade. I shook my head, pulling up the final piece of code on my screen. They don't need to know that you were the hacker all along, that there never was a $20 million ransom, she laughed softly. Sarah, you practically performed surgery on their entire system, exposed years of corruption, and they think you're their savior. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, I said, thinking of all those family dinners where I'd been treated like an outsider. It's about making them thank you for saving them from themselves. The truth was elegantly simple. There had been no external hackers. I'd spent 2 years monitoring the bank systems, watching David's crimes accumulate, waiting for the perfect moment. When he'd grown sloppy enough, I created a sophisticated trail of breadcrumbs leading to phantom attackers. The ransom demand was theater designed to force the Morgans' hands. My phone buzzed, James Morgan's number. Sarah, he said when I answered, his voice rough. The board meeting just ended. They've voted me out. Effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, he sighed heavily. You're probably delighted. Just like you planned. I didn't plan your downfall, James. You and David did that yourselves. I just made sure the truth came out. There was a long pause. The truth? He repeated bitterly. Do you know what the board wants now? They want you to take over as head of security, a permanent position, direct report to the new CEO. Now it was my turn to pause. This wasn't part of my plan. They're impressed with how you handled the crisis, he continued. Said it's time for new blood, modern perspectives. Everything you tried to tell us 2 years ago. I thought about the irony, the position they'd once denied me, now being offered freely. But I had built something of my own now, something that didn't require their approval or acceptance. Thank them for the offer, I said carefully, but I'll have to decline. My consulting firm keeps me quite busy. Of course it does, James replied, and I heard something new in his voice. Respect, maybe, or resignation. You never needed us, did you? Not really? No, I agreed. But you needed me, you just couldn't admit it. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, thinking about legacy. The Morgans had been so focused on preserving their traditional banking dynasty that they'd failed to see the world changing around them. Their rigid adherence to the past had created the perfect conditions for their own undoing. A week later, I filed the divorce papers myself. David, facing multiple federal charges, signed them without argument. As I walked out of the courthouse, legally free of the Morgan name, I felt lighter somehow. The bank survived, though changed forever. New leadership, modern systems, transparent operations, everything I'd advocated for years ago. My firm handled their security transitions, commanding fees that would have made James Morgan choke. Sometimes I caught glimpses of my former father-in-law around the city, looking older and more subdued. The great Morgan legacy he'd fought so hard to protect had crumbled under its own weight, reformed into something he barely recognized. As for me, my consulting firm flourished, built on the reputation of saving Morgan and Sons from catastrophe. Other banks saw our services, desperate to avoid similar scandals. I became known as the woman who'd modernized old-world banking, though few knew the full story of how it happened. One evening, almost a year later, I received an unexpected visitor. James Morgan stood in my office doorway, grayer and thinner than I remembered. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said without preamble. About tradition, adaptation, pride. I was wrong, Sarah. About everything. I gestured for him to sit. Would you like some coffee? He shook his head. I'm selling my shares in the bank. All of them. The new board has made an offer. Smart decision, I said. Let them take it in a new direction. Like you did? He smiled faintly. I know it was you, Sarah. The hack, the ransom, all of it. Took me months to figure it out, but once I did, it was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. I met his gaze steadily. Would you have preferred real hackers? Actual theft? Sometimes the best protection comes from someone who knows exactly where you're vulnerable. He nodded slowly. You found our weakness, not in the systems, but in our pride, our refusal to change. He stood up, straightening his jacket. I just wanted you to know. I understand now. What you were trying to tell us all along. As he turned to leave, I called after him. James, thank you. For what? For teaching me that sometimes the strongest legacy isn't the one we inherit, I said. It's the one we build for ourselves. He smiled, a real smile this time. Goodbye, Sarah. Make sure they do better than we did. I watched him go, thinking about legacy, redemption, and the price of pride. The Morgans had wanted to preserve their dynasty at all costs, never realizing that true strength comes from being willing to tear everything down and build something better from the ruins. In the end, that was my real revenge, not destroying their legacy, but transforming it into something worthy of survival. Something that would last long after the old guard had faded away. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest victory of all.